Hi all, I wanted to touch base because you are in the middle of tackling a new skill. As you're working on your annotated bibliographies, you are dealing with APA style, and we haven't done too much with this, and a lot of students are inexperienced with it. So I thought I would check in with some reassuring thoughts on how APA style actually builds on a lot of skills that you already know and have experience with. So the first thing I wanted to mention was about APA format. In other words, how a paper is set up, what it looks like. Where do you put the page number? Where do you put your name? How does a title page look? All of that you did in your short report, and you'll do again in your annotated bibliography and in your final paper. So make sure you look at the comments on that. I do want the format to be absolutely correct. I want the running head to be exactly right. I want everything to be in its place. That's all stuff that's pretty easy. You can go into your book or go onto the Purdue OWL and you can get it just right. If you're having a challenge, you don't know how to get your page number in the correct place, let me know and I will help you. Beyond that, though, you're thinking about APA documentation. How do you communicate where your sources came from in APA style? And the first thing I want to say about that is nobody does this stuff off the top of their head. If you're thinking, oh, I don't know APA in terms of I don't know how to do it without having to look it up, nobody does. I have to look it up all the time. That is absolutely normal. You need your brain space for other things. Do not try to memorize this. Look it up every single time. That's what professionals do. Beyond that, since you've already used APA style in previous classes and in this one, you know a lot about how to use sources that you can apply to APA style as well. The differences are relatively minor. So the first thing you already know is you know how to choose credible sources. No matter what citation style you use, you're always going to want to have the highest quality sources. That's the same in this project as well. So if you know how to find sources, determine whether they're relevant to you and whether you can trust them, you've gone a long way. The second thing that you already know is that once you find something in your source that you want to make way into your paper, you have three choices for how to use it. You can quote it. You can quote it exactly, you can put it in quotation marks and cite it, copying everything in the quotation marks word for word from the source. APA is the same way. You can paraphrase it. In other words, you can take a small chunk from the source and put it into your own words. You thoroughly change it. You really reword it so it sounds like your voice and not the voice of a source. And then you cite it. Doesn't change in APA. Or the last thing you can do is summarize. So if you have a whole long source and you don't really need all of the supporting details and all of the ins and outs of that source, you can shrink that source down to just a couple of lines if summarizing does what you need it to do. Same in APA, you put that in your own words and you would cite it. So whether you choose to quote, paraphrase, or summarize, APA rules don't affect that. Third, you already have experience in APA with citing in the text with parentheses. So you know that after you quote, paraphrase, or summarize, you need to indicate in that same sentence where that information came from. Most of the time we do that at the end of a sentence. So the sentence has information in it, and at the end of the sentence we put parentheses followed by a period, and in the parentheses we give a little cue as to which source at the end that information is from. That doesn't change in APA. Now what goes in the parentheses does change, but overall the fact that we indicate in the sentence where the source is, that doesn't change. You might do it in the sentence itself, or you might do it in parentheses. The fourth thing is that we list all of our sources on a separate page at the back. In APA it's called something different. It's called the references page. But other than that, it looks really similar to an MLA Works Cited page. It's double spaced. It has hanging indents, it's alphabetized, and it's a list of all of your sources with all of the requisite information. Last, between numbers 3 and 4, the in-text citations and the list at the end, there is a perfect match. So if I see something cited in your paper, I can turn to that last page, that list of sources, and I can immediately find it. If I'm looking at your list of sources, I can pick one of those sources and I can find where you used it in the paper. Nothing that's used in the paper is not on the list. Nothing on the list is not used in the paper. There's an exact match. And I can follow it as the reader really, really quickly. So if I see that you cite Smith in the paper, I can turn to that list, run my finger down the left-hand side, and alphabetically find Smith. If I find Jones on your list of sources, and I can go back into the paper, skim until I find Jones. It's really, really easy for me to match them up. That's usually the first thing I do when I grade a paper, is I match all the sources, and if I can't match them all within a minute, something's gone wrong. Okay. So those are the things that you already know how to do. There's a few new things. So I have a little post-it. New. One new thing is, what do those citations look like? In MLA, you're used to citing with a last name and a page number. In APA, you cite with a last name, a comma, a date, and then a page number if you have one for a quote. The important thing is the date. Last name, date. In APA, they are married. So anytime you mention the last name of a source, you're going to follow it with the date. Either in parentheses right after it if it's in the sentence, or they're going to be together in the parentheses at the end of a sentence. So anytime you say Smith, you follow it with 2017. They're married, they follow each other throughout the paper. The second thing that is different is, what does that list look like? In APA, it's called your references. The order of information is different, and it looks a little bit different. So you're going to want to use your book or the Purdue OWL to figure out what goes in quote marks, what gets italicized, what order does the information go in. For example, in APA, there are no first names. There is last name, comma, first initial. And the date comes earlier than it does in MLA. But again, don't try to memorize that. Just ask yourself, what kind of source is this? Go into your book or into the Purdue OWL, look up that type of source, and figure out how to fill in the formula based on the information from your source. So APA is really pretty similar to all the other citation styles that there are. You already know a lot. I'd say 90% of what you need to know, and so the rest of it you can just look up in your book or ask me and I will help. So continue on to do APA in your annotated bibliography.